So Trump was elected on a clear mandate to remove as many illegal migrants as possible, to reduce immigration, and to have a policy that says that Native Americans are the ones who should be the priority of the American state. And by Native Americans, I mean the people who built America. The response to this policy was various riots from the far left and from the Latino community, demanding that nobody who is illegally in the United States be removed. And the position of the Democratic establishment is to say that the protesters are right, that really it's the fault of the government of the United States, of the Trump regime, that there are riots in the first place because they dared to try to impose the law of the land against people who shouldn't be in that country.
Trump and his outrageous attempt to not only target our sanctuary city, but to frighten us and intimidate us.
What we're seeing in Los Angeles is chaos that is provoked by the administration. When you raid Home Depot and workplaces, when you tear parents and children apart, and when you run armored caravans through our streets, you cause fear and you cause panic.
Putting fuel on this fire ever since he announced he was taking over the National Guard. An illegal act, an immoral act, an unconstitutional act.
He's destroying one of our great states. And if I didn't get involved, if we didn't bring the Guard in, and we would bring more in if we needed it, because we have to make sure there's going to be law and order.
This is significant. And we are seeing a conflict now over who gets to control the National Guard of California. We're seeing at least one former congressman demanding that the National Guard of California be taken under the control of the governor of California in order to make sure that federal agents cannot actually operate in the state of California. And you know for a fact that the rulers of Oregon and the rulers of Washington, so essentially the entire American Western seaboard, will be looking at this example and figuring out what they can do. And we also know that the Democrats are calling for mass unrest across the United States, with the idea being to paralyze the American federal government. This is also happening at a time when there's a brewing constitutional crisis between the executive and the judiciary, where Trump is fighting with the judicial system essentially over what authorities he has and what authorities he does not have. And the division is clear. Should the letter of the law be obeyed, or is there an overarching principle that the American state is there to serve the American people first and foremost, and all other considerations are secondary? As this fight expands, and as this fight escalates, we are probably getting closer to a stage where some enterprising governor, maybe in New York or New Jersey, maybe in Delaware, maybe in California, maybe in Washington State, decides that he's going to go further and that he is going to try to use the forces at his command to weaken the federal government. Or, alternatively, getting to a stage where already Trump is calling for the arrest of the governor of California, where he decides that he's actually going to make this arrest. Or where he decides that he's going to stack the Supreme Court with appointees that are going to approve his own decisions to make sure that the judiciary doesn't challenge him. Or where he decides that he's going to ignore the judiciary and violate the American Constitution. At that point, we will be in the great emergency. When we go into the great emergency, where the executive asserts that the situation is so extreme that the old rules of the game no longer apply and new measures must be taken, for example, by declaring that certain states are in a state of insurrection, or by declaring that senators from insurrectionist states can no longer vote. When we go into that, this is when we will see conflict happening within the West. And if it happens in America, you can be sure that there will be a contagion effect. Just like in 2011, when the so-called, unfortunately named Arab Spring happened, it began in Tunisia and spread to Egypt, Yemen, Libya, Syria, Jordan. You can expect that Britain might be infected, or Ireland might be infected, or France. These countries are essentially tinderboxes because of the incompetence of their rulers, because of their insistence on massive amounts of unsustainable spending, which the Americans are very guilty of themselves, and on making welfare available to foreigners who absolutely hate the people of the countries that they live in. You're going to get to a stage where this mega crisis moves from just a series of localized perma-crises into some kind of emergency that then becomes transformative. And then you will see ethnic enclaves asserting that they are going to govern themselves and that they can expel police forces from their areas. You could easily see that happening in Birmingham in Britain, or in parts of London, or in parts of Manchester. And at that point, all bets are off. And when this happens, one of the effects is going to be a massive shakeup in the financial markets, where investors lose confidence and where the foreign money that is currently in the West begins to run away. This is when you see the emergency transforming into an existential crisis. The world won't end. Life will continue. A lot of normalcy will just keep going, you know? People will find a way to survive. But we are heading towards a transition into something that the West really has not experienced in centuries. That is perhaps most comparable to what the Chinese and Muslims experienced when they discovered that they could no longer govern their societies in a functional way under the old system, and they discovered that all kinds of new experiments must be undertaken, and the cost of these experiments was absolutely horrific. And my fear is that the West is really heading in that direction, that what we're seeing in the United States, that the low-level civil war expressed in the form of terrorism and rioting that we are beginning to see signs of in Europe, is going to take a very different form. In moments like these, people lose their ability to reason and to compromise. Even if leftists were to offer rational compromises that sane people would accept, no sane person would trust them. And if the leftists believe that the right is out to destroy them, then they too will not be in a position to accept any reasonable compromises that the right offers. Sometimes the world goes into seasons of madness, and it seems that this is where the West is heading.
If you enjoyed this piece of premium content from the Lotus Eaters, head to our website where you can find more.